So the other day I walked into the kitchen and I said, "Hey Dad, I'm hungry." And he said, "Hi hungry, I'm Dad."
So the other day, I told my dad that it was cold in here, and I asked him to turn the heat up. He said, "Well, I can't turn the heat up, but you can go in the corner." I said, "Why go in the corner?" And he said, "Because it's 90 degrees." I'm like, oh my gosh, what?
One day, my dad asked me, "How many tickles does it take to make an octopus to laugh?" I said, "I don't know." He said, "Tentacles." I was like, "What? Tentacles?" Oh, tentacles. So the other day, I asked my dad to make me a sandwich. He said, "Poof, you're a sandwich." So I said, "Seriously, Dad, you can't make a better joke?"
Okay, that's good. So I'm not going to tell any bad dad jokes. I was talking about this with my daughter and my family last night at dinner. I said, I don't think I ever heard a bad dad joke growing up. My dad didn't tell jokes, and so he didn't have any bad jokes. And my daughter kicked in. She goes, "Oh, believe me, Dad, your bad jokes have more than made up for Grandpa's." So I won't inflict any of those on you this morning. But this past week in preparing for this sermon, I've been reflecting on my father. And I have had and still have an awesome father. I'm so grateful for my dad, and just kind of been thinking back to all the things that I loved about my father and the things I love to do with my father. And I might surprise some of you, but one of the memories, the great memories that I have about me and my dad is going to work with my dad. My dad was the plant manager of these two businesses. They were both beverage businesses. One was a dairy, so it was a milk processing plant, and the other one was a pop or soda, whatever you call it, and orange juice. So he would go between these two plants, and he was the manager of them, general manager. And when I was like 12 or 13, maybe 13 or 14, he would bring me on Saturdays once in a while to work with him. And I thought that was awesome. And, all these things about going to work with Dad, it started with bacon. Cool. My dad had bacon every morning. I wasn't sure about this, so I called my parents last night. I said, I remember having bacon every morning for breakfast. And Mom was like, "Yes, every single morning we had bacon." So we all served you bacon today in honor of my father. So I hope you enjoyed it. Everybody loves bacon. Thank you. You're welcome. Send it to my dad. And I loved having bacon with my dad in the morning, and then jumping in the car. And it was just something about riding with my dad in the front seat, going to work. It was so cool. We get there, and Dad's the boss. And it's just cool seeing your dad walk around. Everybody respected him so much. And I watched him all the time. And then he would send me out, especially on these Saturdays, and I would sweep the yard. Now, I know that's a surprise to some of you. One of these plants was like 2 or 3 acres, and there's no grass on the yard. It's just cement. And all these big semis would come in, and as they would bring dirt and mud from the road, it would just get on all this pavement. And so my job was to go in there and just sweep up 2 to 3 acres of cement every Saturday. But that was far and away one of the easiest jobs. When my brother got older, we went and started working in the summers with Dad, and Dad just felt like we should have all the worst jobs. The president of the company, I hope he's not listening, his kids are not listening, they were lazy butts, man. They didn't do anything. And my dad was like, "My son, nobody bearing the name of Minling is going to be lazy. I expect you guys to work harder than everybody else." So he gave us all the worst jobs. And without question, the worst job he gave us was cleaning the dumpsters. Now, That's no big deal if you work at, an appliance factory, but at a dairy, the dumpster was full of spoiled milk, nasty, rancid sour cream, cottage cheese. All these nasty dairy products were thrown into this big industrial dumpster, and then the compactor would smash them, and all that stuff would squeeze out all over the place. And so our job was to clean up that nasty mess. It's in the summertime, so it stinks like crazy. Guys, it's time for the dumpster duty. Oh, no. So we'd get frustrated. We'd throw sour cream at each other, me and my brother. It was a nasty, that stuff stinks so bad. And years later, I was like, what's up with that? Why did we get all the bad jobs, And I realized that my dad was training us. Just because you're the boss's son, that doesn't mean you get it easy somehow. In fact, as a kid, before I went to work, and then after, Dad was always very, very focused on our work ethic. And he drilled into us perseverance, hard work, problem-solving skills. And years later, I kind of realized that my dad always operated on two levels. At work, it was like this. He was our boss, and so, he expected us to work hard for our paycheck, but he was also our dad. And so he expected certain things from us as a boss, but as a father, he was training us. He cared about work ethic, perseverance, leadership skills, problem-solving skills. And he cared more about that than us just doing a good job as an employee. And I got thinking about this, and it's like my dad operated on these two levels everywhere he was. At home, he's paying bills, he's loving his wife, he's leading his family, he's a spiritual leader. My dad is operating at this level of navigating life and whatever that brought, but he's also training his kids. And I didn't realize this until years later when I became a father, and I realized this dual role, these two levels, lead your family, provide for your family, work hard. This is what great dads do. Love your wife, be a leader, but you're a father, so train your kids because God gave you those kids to disciple them, not just to provide. God bless you if you're a father that provides for your kids, but don't think for a second that if you've brought home the bacon, that you've done your job as a father. No, you're to disciple your kids. You're to train your kids. Now, check this out. This is what Jesus was doing. He was always operating on two levels. When you read the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you can't miss this. Well, maybe you have, but after today, you will never miss it again. You see Jesus ministering to the people, right? What's he do? He heals people. He casts out demons. He feeds people. He heals blind men. He's doing all these things for the people, right? That's one level. Meanwhile, he's training his disciples. And once you see these two levels in the Gospels, they pop up all over the place. He cares about the people. He ministers to the people. He's helping the people. But he's using those very circumstances where he's helping people and ministering them. He's using those circumstances to train his disciples, to teach them, to develop them. And we're going to see that today in the famous story of Jesus feeding the 5,000, and it's actually more than 5,000. The Bible says it was 5,000 men. Surely there was tons of women and children there. So maybe 10,000 people. Turn to John chapter 6, and we're going to look at two lessons from John 6. Two lessons, and there's a ton of lessons in this passage, like there is in every passage about Jesus, but we only have 4 more hours together today, and so I only have time for 2 lessons to teach you from Jesus in John chapter 6. If you have a new person sitting next to a guest, please poke them and say, he's kidding. And there's no 4-hour, I could preach a 4-hour sermon, but I won't. Stand with me, let's read John 6, and as we're reading, watch for these 2 levels. Jesus ministering to the people, Jesus training the disciples. And hear this, if you're a follower of Jesus today, he's working on these 2 levels in your life. He's ministering to you. Jesus cares about you. He wants to feed you, help you, heal you. But he also wants to train you as his disciple. Here we go, John 6. I'll read 13 verses. Sometime after this, Jesus crossed to the far shore of the Sea of Galilee, that is, the Sea of Tiberias. He's writing mostly to Greeks, so not people who were from Israel. And a great crowd of people followed him. Why? Because they saw the signs he had performed by healing the sick, all the miracles stuff. Then Jesus went up on a mountainside and sat down with his disciples. I'll point out why that was so important in a second. And sat down with his disciples. The Jewish Passover festival was near. When Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming toward him, he said to Philip, where shall we buy bread for all these people to eat? Now watch this. John writes and says, he asked this only to test him, for he already knew what he was going to do. He's just testing Philip. I love this. Verse 7, Philip answered him and said, let's take more than half a year's wages to buy enough bread for each one to have one bite. Another of his disciples, Andrew, that's Simon Peter's brother, spoke up. Now here's a boy who has 5 small barley loaves and a couple of fish, but how far will that go amongst so many? Jesus panics. No, Jesus says, have the people sit down. There's plenty of grass in that place, and they all sat down. It was about 5,000 men. Again, maybe 10,000 people total. Jesus then took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed to those who were seated as much as they wanted. He did the same with the fish. And when they had all, 10,000 people, when they had all had enough to eat, these aren't snacks, this is a meal. When they had all had enough to eat, he said to his disciples, gather the pieces that are left over, let nothing be wasted. Little lesson there. So they gathered them and filled 12 disciples, 12 baskets. They filled 12 baskets with the pieces of the 5 barley loaves left over from those who had eaten. What a miracle! You can be seated. You can be seated. I love this story. Now, this story made such an impression. Keep your Bibles open. This story made such an impression on the disciples that each one of the gospel writers tell this story. Did you know that? It's the only story that shows up in all 4 gospels. And each one is the same story. 5,000 men fed in this area with 5 loaves and 2 fishes, same details, same area, but each writer, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, each tell us just a little bit different angle, and so we put these pieces together, and we can figure out, more details about what's happening in the story. Now, we said that Jesus is teaching lessons to his disciples. He's training his disciples, and what I want to do today, since it's Father's Day, and since great fathers don't just provide for their kids, they're also training their kids, I want us to pay attention to how Jesus acts like a father in this passage. Fathers were teachers, they were rabbis. So Jesus is not married, he doesn't have any kids, but the way he acts as a rabbi is very fatherly. In Isaiah 9:6 says that Jesus will be called the everlasting Father. It's not referring to him being married and having kids. He acts like a father. He's an originator. He's a source. He's an authority. And so here is Jesus acting very much like a father. Even the note about the Passover is a fatherly note because the Passover was a feast that featured the Father. The Father planned it, he organized it, he arranged it, and then he emceed it, you might say. He was the one who spoke at the Passover. He's the only one who prays at the Passover. And so when Jesus prays later on in a very Passover-like way, he took the bread and broke it. He's acting like a father. And you can see this fatherly actions in the life of Jesus as he's treating his disciples as if they're his sons. And he loves them, and he's training them, and he's pouring into them while he's ministering to the people, while in this case, he's feeding the 5,000. So the 2 big lessons, there's tons of lessons here, but the 2 big lessons that I want to point out to you are the 2 lessons that Jesus teaches his disciples, trains his disciples. And all of you who are dads, I want to challenge you. Listen to Jesus train his disciples and make it your goal that whatever lesson you're teaching your kids, and if you're a great dad, you get what I mean. You're teaching your kids lessons. Whatever else you teach your kids, teach them these 2 lessons. Don't miss these 2 lessons that Jesus teaches his disciples. What are they? Okay, jump into the text. Let's go. First, verse 1, Jesus crosses to the far shore of the Sea of Galilee. This is an important detail. Where is the far shore of the Galilee? We could guess, but we don't have to guess, because remember I said this gospel, this story is in all 4 gospels. When Luke tells this story, he tells us that this happened at around the vicinity of Bethsaida. Well, think of Jesus down in Tiberias or down here maybe. The far shore of Galilee is real simple now. It's around Bethsaida. Again, Luke tells us it's Bethsaida. Philip, Andrew, and Peter, the only 3 disciples mentioned in the story, are all from Bethsaida. Very interesting. So here's where this is happening. Along the plains, I've been here, along the plains of Bethsaida, he goes to this north-south. Now check this out. Verse 2 says that a great crowd of people followed him. How did they do that? Did they jump in the boat and follow? No. Watch this. The Sea of Galilee is small enough that you can most of the time see across it. Certainly you could see a boat going like this. So as Jesus and the disciples are in the boat going this way here, the people are following along the shore. And the other Gospels tell us that as they did, people in these small towns were like, where are you guys going? What's going on? What's the great crowd for? The crowd gets bigger and bigger because, hey, Jesus, he's going to land over there. He's the guy that's healing everybody. He's the guy everybody's hearing about Jesus. And so the crowd gets bigger. And I measured from around here, and I don't know for sure if this is where they left, but the scriptures give us some clues. It might have been Tiberias. From here to here is 9 miles around. These people are watching the boat, and they're running and walking and gathering people, and the crowd gets bigger and bigger. So by the time Jesus lands, there's this 5,000, 6,000, 8,000, 10,000 people who've been walking 3, 4, 5, maybe 9, 10 miles, and there's this frenzy. As Jesus gets out of the boat, this great crowd gathers, kind of like the frenzy tonight when the Cavs win Game 7. Hey, come on, right? I mean, this is what it was like in the day. Jesus was the crazy celebrity. Everywhere he went, people were like, wow, I know that a couple months ago, I said, standing right here, that I didn't think anybody could beat the Warriors in 4 games, 4 times. I knew the Cavs and the Warriors would be in the finals, but now watching the way LeBron's in beast mode, and Kyrie, I mean, they can do it tonight, right? And when you watch the game, unless you paid $49,000 and have courtside seats tonight, $50,000, I don't know how much the seats are going for. I could only afford 2. No, just kidding. I'm joking. Bad joke, bad dad joke. You watch tonight, they'll have cameras, and Cleveland will be in a frenzy tonight. That's what it was like wherever Jesus went. People just pushing and trying to shove, to touch him, to hear him, to see him. And it says that this great crowd is gathering because of all the healing and the performing of the miracles. So you can just sense the energy here. He lands, and these people are like, wow. How's Jesus going to respond to all these people? I mean, Jesus is not a showman. He's not a guy who looks for the limelight. He's not a guy who enjoys, everybody giving him attention. It's just the opposite. So you see Jesus, I don't know whether he was shy like I am. I know people are surprised to find out that I'm an introvert. But I don't know what Jesus was. But I can see he didn't live for the limelight. And so as this great crowd gathers, you're wondering, what's he going to do? And what he's about to do is to train his disciples in a very important lesson about what to do with people, how to see people. Did you notice it says that these people followed him, and when they saw the signs he performed. Verse 3, Jesus went up on a mountainside and sat down with his disciples. When a rabbi has disciples around him, when he sits down, that's code for it's teaching time. He's about to teach a lesson or 2. And whenever a rabbi sat down, all the disciples gathered around. All right, we're ready to be taught, ready for a lesson. So here, there's a lesson coming, or at least a couple lessons, and it tells us about the Passover. Then the very next thing, verse 5, Jesus has just sat down. He's just started to teach. When Jesus looks up and saw a great crowd, first words out of his mouth when he sees the great crowd is he addresses Philip, who's from Bethsaida, and says, Philip, what are we going to do here? How are we going to get food for all these people? In other words, Jesus sees the people, and instead of thinking, oh, Really? 5,000, 10,000 people? Can I get away from these people? No. When he sees the people, the first thing he thinks about is, these guys got to be hungry. They've been with me, following me. They've been running around the lake. These people got to be tired. And he begins to challenge his disciples. He tests Philip. He says to Philip, we're going to feed these people. We're going to take care of these people. I can just hear Philip saying, what do you mean? We don't have enough money. Where are we going to find enough money to buy the bread? There's not enough bread. We can't care for all these people. And after all, Jesus, why is it our problem? Really, who cares about all these people? And Jesus says in so many words, I care. And Philip, as my disciple, I want you to care. Watch this, write this down. Here's the lesson. Train your kids to care about people. See, that's the big lesson. It may not be that big of a lesson if you're not a Christ follower. Really, it should be whether you're a follower of Jesus or not. We're beginning to see even great leaders are beginning to recognize how important it is to care for the people in their businesses and their companies. But we got this from Jesus. Nobody loved like Jesus. Nobody cared for people like Jesus. And Jesus cares that he trains his disciples, because our best guess is it's a year from John 6. It's about a year from John 6 that Jesus dies. So he's got a year left to pour into his disciples, to teach them, to pass on his DNA. And what he cares about is people. Every great Christian leader, every great spiritual leader truly loves people and cares about people. And fathers, I want to challenge you. Disciple your kids to care about people. We got way too many self-centered leaders, way too many people who all they care about is themselves. They think that leadership is some privilege where now everybody can serve me. It's not. Leadership is a place to serve people. You've been given that leadership position in order to serve people. And dads, you're a leader. Train your kids to love people, to care about people. And you say, well, how do you do that? Let's go back to the text. Verse 5, when Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd. You can write this down. Caring for people starts with seeing them. You say, well, that's really simplistic. I know it is. It's the simple things that matter. We are so stinking self-centered, all of us, that we organize life around us in such a way that it's always taking care of our needs. We're blind to the people around us. And this is what the 2020 vision has been all around, to open our eyes, to see the people. Jesus says in John chapter 4, open your eyes and see the fields are white in the harvest. Do you see the people that are all around you? Or are you just living your own little Christian bubble and all you care about is you and yourself? And no, if you're a follower of Jesus, you need to see the people that are all around you and care about them. This is what Jesus is training his disciples. They're like, we don't have enough food. We don't have enough money. Send them away. Jesus is like, no. I care about these people. When Mark tells this story, he says when Jesus landed, same story, when he landed and saw a crowd, he had compassion on them. He cared for them. And so these people are like sheep without a shepherd. There are people who don't have any spiritual food or physical food. Nobody seems to care about them. I care about them. And he wants to train his disciples that caring for people starts with seeing them, their needs, seeing the situation that they're in. When you're driving by a guy on the street with a homeless sign, I will work for food, whatever, you just drive by. I know sometimes it seems like they're all over the place. Do you say, that guy's lazy? He's just a scam artist? Yeah, there are lazy people who are living on the streets. Yeah, there are scam artists, absolutely. But you don't know that. You've never talked to that person. Why would you judge a person if you've never talked to them? And when you are in the car with your kids and you just trash that person on the street, and your narrative about people who are in bad circumstances, you're training your kids. You don't have to say, kids, sit down, listen, that person's lazy. Kids, sit down, But when you say something, you're training. The narrative that's around you, dads, pay attention to what you're saying. Teach your kids to see people and to care about them, to have compassion on them. And you'll be a great leader, a great father. You'll become more and more like Christ. Now, Matthew says that the disciples' solution, see this in Matthew 14, they came and said, this is a remote place here up in Bethsaida, around, top of the Sea of Galilee. It's already late. Send the crowds away. This is their solution. Get rid of the problem. Send them away so they can, take care of themselves, really, because we don't want to have to deal with them. And notice what Jesus says. He says, Philip, where are we going to get this bread? Philip, this is your problem. Philip, we're going to do something about this. And Philip's like, what do you mean? I can't do this. And some of the other gospel writers give us more and more pictures that help us see that caring for people means engaging with them, not just seeing them, but it means helping them, engaging with them, asking them questions, getting involved with them, not avoiding them. Jesus didn't avoid people. He stepped towards them. He sees the crowd and says, we're going to take care of these people. We're going to minister to them. We're going to feed them. But he's not just focused on feeding the people. Again, let me dial in now. He's focused on training the disciples. The disciples are feeling like we're in impossible circumstances here. All this food, all these people, 10,000 people. We've got 5 loaves, 5 barley loaves, 2 fish. This is ridiculous. We're in impossible circumstances. We've got insufficient resources. Jesus, why are you even asking us? This is none of our business. Send them away. This is overwhelming. Jesus puts us in overwhelming circumstances to teach us some of the most valuable lessons we'll ever learn. Listen to me. Jesus sovereignly puts us in overwhelming circumstances where we feel like things are impossible, we have insufficient resources. He does that on purpose to challenge us, to grow us. He has lessons to teach us that can't be taught when you're sitting all pretty, looking good on a Sunday morning, got some preacher jawing. These lessons are taught when you're facing the impossible circumstances, when you're going, we don't have what it takes. This is exactly how many of you felt when we began to launch the 2020 vision. You're like, what? 4 churches in 4 years? Are you nuts? What book have you been reading? The Bible. He told us to go to the next town. 4 in 4 years? That's impossible. But you know the story of the 2020 vision. It's not just launching 4 campuses in 4 years. It's completely wiping out our debt once and for all. That's impossible. We can't do this. We've never been able to do it in the past. We're going to do it. God's going to lead us to do it. And the renovation of the campus is starting the Elyria Family Shelter Generation House. Why are we trying to do so much in such a short amount of time? This is what God's leading us to do. These impossible circumstances have been given to us by God as He leads us. Why? Because God's trying to teach us to trust Him, to look to Him. We don't have the resources necessary. Remember when I came to you and I said that we believe this is what God's called us to do, the 2020 vision? I laid it out and then I said, some of you are asking how much it's going to cost, $2.5 million. And I heard you all gasp, like, 2.5. We've never raised that kind of money. Where are we going to, we're right back into John 6. This is impossible. But God, I even did a little bit of that. But God's leading us. Why? Because this isn't about just a 2020 vision. Here in John 6, it's not just about feeding people. It's about God training us. So I challenged you as a church, let's trust God, each one of us. Let's pray. Let's ask God what He wants us to do. Let's not give the most that we can. This is the best I can do. Let's ask God, what do you want me to give? Not how much do we have. What do you want to do? How do you want to stretch me? And you did. As a church, we challenge you to raise 2.5. Remember Celebration Sunday when we put that number up there and it was 2.7 million? We exceeded and you guys all went nuts. Well, I have an update for you because you are crazy people. You really believe God. because you didn't stop on Celebration Sunday. We didn't stop with 2.7. The next week, more money came in, more pledges came in. And the next week, more commitment cards. And we're all looking at each other like, what's going on here? And it's continued, and we're like, should we keep updating the church? What's happening? And finally, it looks like it's slowed down. Here's how much you have committed over the next 4 years, next 3 years. Hold on to your seats for a minute. $3.1 million. Is that crazy or what? Come on, you need more than that. I mean, 2.5 million, and you are saying we're going to give 3.1? I know some of you are like, good, now I don't have to give. No, this isn't about the goal of 2.5. This isn't about the goal of 2.5. This is a goal about you learning to ask God, what do you want me to do? How much do you want me to give? Can I trust you? So he's given you a number. Stay at it. Don't stop tithing. Keep trusting him. You know, we've seen some transfer giving where people have stopped tithing to give to the 2020. No. Don't do that. Continue to trust God with your tithes and continue to trust him to give what he's called you to give. And you say, well, what are we going to do with all that extra money? I have no idea. No, just kidding. I have an idea. I'm about to share it with you. All that money that's being given and all that money that's being pledged, it's all to 2020. So we can't use it for general operating expenses. In good faith, it has to be given, has to be used for the 2020 vision. So here's what we've been talking about doing, and I want to announce today. This is so exciting. That what we're going to do with the extra income that God is giving is not only are we going to pay off our debt 4 years early, like we said, but our first priority is to wipe that out even earlier than we announced to you. So this is crazy. Jonathan Abdul, our finance guy, tells us that if you continue to give at the level that you're giving, again, tithing and 2020, we will be able to pay off that debt this stinking year. Is that crazy? I mean, remember when we looked at that and we're thinking, how can we pay off the debt for 4 years? Some of you have been here since 1992 when we got the debt, and you're like pinching yourselves going, are we really going to pay off this debt this time? Yeah, but not only pay it off completely, pay it off 4 years early, now even maybe 5 years early. Yes, 5 years early. That's what we're going to do. It's the first thing we're going to do with that money. Secondly, we're going to move up the Elyria campus renovations, the biggest ones, and we're going to try to do that this summer. We're calling it the Summer Blitz. I know, this is crazy. We can do this as we follow God. Summer Blitz, I'm announcing it today that we're going to, and this has to be done in the summer, the renovations for the crossroads, the bathrooms, and the auditorium. You can't do it during the school year because of the school, so it has to be done in the summer. And so we're like, can we do this summer? Wouldn't it be incredible what kind of momentum we would have, the kind of things that would be happening if we could do this summer? So we figured it out, and we're announcing it today. Starting July 10th, that's the first Sunday, we're shutting down the Elyria Main Auditorium, shutting down the Elyria Main Auditorium crossroads, shutting down the bathrooms, that whole area. And we're going to move all of those people to the RNC for the summer, starting Sunday, July 10th. And you're like, well, how are we going to fit all those people? Here's how. We've started to buy chairs, and we're going to pack out the RNC with chairs, and we're going to 3 services. 8:15, this is summertime, 8:15, 10 o'clock, and 11:45. Yes, there may be some inconveniences, but we as a church, come on, we as a church are not going to let our inconveniences keep us from reaching people, right? That's not the way we run. We're going to do whatever it takes to reach people. So we're going to shut this place down for the summer, into September. And here's the fun part. When all the renovations are done and we've had all the fun we've had in the RNC, 3 services, crazy exciting there. We're going to have a grand reopening, invite the mayor, invite the city of Elyria. You are going to be doing everybody say this letter with me, that's why it's called Blitz. We're going to be doing the 5 B's like crazy. That is, building relationships with people. You know the 5 B's. Build, bring, belong, believe, become. I want to challenge you, invite you, call you to make this summer a summer blitz where you're doing the 5 B's. So when we had this grand reopening in the fall and invite the mayor and the city of Elyria and all this stuff, you're inviting your neighbors. There's this huge celebration that we have, that we are making this big splash in the community. Why? Because the 2020 vision has all been about reaching people. And we can't reach them with the gospel if we don't go to them. People are just not driving by Church of the Open Door and going, oh, a steeple. I think I'll go to church today. No, you got to build relationships. You got to share the gospel. You got to love people and bring them to a place where they can hear the gospel. And this is the big bang that we're going to do this summer and this fall. Is it going to be crazy fun? Say yes. Say yes, 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 yes. Good. I know you're okay. So we'll hear more information about that. I don't expect you to remember everything I just said. We'll give you more information and challenge you with invite cards and all kinds of ways of building relationships. But that's what it's all about, because God is using the 2020 vision to get us to open our eyes to what He wants to do. We are the fields that John 4:35, Jesus was talking about, the fields that are ripe in the harvest. Jesus wants our church, every church, to stop focusing on ourselves and start opening our eyes, to trust Him. This is what it's all about, to trust Him, that He wants to see people come to know Him. And He wants to use you. Yes, you. He wants to use us. That's the purpose of the church, to reach people. And that's why we're going all out. That's why we're calling it the Summer Blitz. And I want to know, are you all in? Don't just kind of whisper to me. Are you all in? I think so. It's going to be awesome. We're going to tell stories about Summer Blitz. We're going to tell stories about the 2020 vision. And God is using this to train us to trust Him. This is what's happening in John 6. It's not just about feeding the 10,000. It's about training the disciples to trust Him, which is what you want to teach your kids. This is the second greatest lesson. In fact, it's the first greatest lesson, but the second one today. Dads, moms, train your kids to trust God. Write that down and let me say this to you. This is the most important lesson you can teach your kids. There's nothing more important than teaching your kids, training your kids to trust God, to trust Him for their salvation, to repent of their sins and turn to Him, to trust Him for their salvation, to trust Him to lead them for not only their salvation, but their sanctification, to trust that God is using all of life to shape us. He doesn't want to just get us saved. He wants us to trust Him, that He wants to make us more like Christ, to sanctify us, to make us more and more and more like Jesus, the only perfect Holy One. We'll never be perfect. We'll never be completely holy, but we're to be coming more and more like Christ. Dads, your job is to train your kids to trust God for daily provision, to trust that God's plan is so much bigger and so much more important than our puny business plans, our puny family plans. God's plan is the only plan worth committing yourself to. Train your kids to trust God for salvation, for sanctification, for daily provision, to sell out to Jesus Christ, to trust Him for future salvation, for heaven, to live your life sold out for Jesus Christ, trusting completely in God. That's your job. That's the most important lesson to teach your kids. And if you don't teach your kids to trust God, you failed as a father. I'm sorry. That's just the truth. He's entrusted you with these kids. And however important it is to teach them to be good leaders, to use their money wisely, to be hard workers, to have a good work ethic, important as those lessons are, none of them, not even them stacked up, is more important than training your kids to trust God. Not to play the game of saying they trust God, but really trust themselves, but to sell out to trust God. And that's the lesson Jesus is teaching His disciples again and again and again and again. And so, how do you do that? Go back into the text. How does Jesus begin to train his disciples to trust God? We've already seen it. Verse 6, when just after Jesus says to Philip, hey, we're going to get enough money to buy all this food, all this bread. Remember how John said he asked this only to, you can write this down, to test him. This is what great fathers do. They test their kids. What's that mean? It means to invite your kids into the problem. Isn't that what Jesus is doing? Jesus doesn't need Philip's help. He doesn't need Philip's advice. Why is he asking Philip? Because he's testing Philip. Because testing someone is a part of training them. This testing, this inviting them in. Dads, when your kids are babies and when they're really, really small, meet all their needs immediately. Provide for them. But as they get older, teach them how to be involved in the problem. Teach them to embrace the impossible circumstances, to see how hard this is going to be, and then to trust God. They'll never learn to trust God if they don't feel the pressure, if they don't feel the burden of how's this going to work out? I don't know how we're going to pay this bill for college or to get a car. Don't just buy your kids cars. I know I'm stepping on toes here. Bring your kids into the problem and invite them in and challenge them to be a part of the solution. Let's do whatever we can as our kids get older and older to invite them into circumstances that are over their head as we're testing them, just like Jesus did, to test them and then to teach them, now that we have their attention, now that they're feeling this pressure, to teach them, to coach them through the process of how God's going to provide, to coach them through the process of how this is all going to work out. Involve them so that they're engaged with this. I just think it's a huge mistake. Again, I know I'm stepping on toes, but I think it's a huge mistake when we just buy, provide for our kids the older they get, and they never feel the consequence. They never learn to trust God and how they are going to have to pray, seek God, trust God. That's what home is for. It's a training ground to train your kids. So coach them and then show them how to do it. This is what Jesus does. He doesn't say, well, I don't know how we're going to do this. Figure it out, guys. See ya. No, he tests them, brings them into the problem. He coaches them through the process, and then he models. This is how we're going to do it. I'm going to show you how to trust God. And you're saying, well, I can't wait to see this. Go back to the text. How does Jesus model how to trust God? Well, what is the first thing that Jesus does when he's got the 10,000 people, he's got them all sitting down, he's got 5 loaves, 2 fish, ridiculous, insufficient resources. The stage is set. What's Jesus going to do? He doesn't say, it's all about me. He turns to God. Let's pretend this is bread. It is bread. That's good. He lifts the bread to heaven. Nobody got that? Come back in a couple of weeks when we preach from John 6. He lifts it to heaven and turns to God and says, this is what we do, guys. When we're facing challenges, we turn to God. This is what you want to model for your kids. Guys, let's trust God. Let's turn to him. Let's address him. Let's bring our situation. Let's bring whatever resources we have. Let's bring them to Jesus. Let's bring them to God. It may be meager. They may seem like nothing. Bring them to God. Address him with the circumstances that you have, the resources that you have. Turn to him. And then what? Well, Jesus begins to address God. He's saying, God, I give you what we have here. Father, I give you these 5 loaves. I give you this 2 fish. I turn to you. I trust you. So turn to God when you're facing challenges. Trust him with what you have. And then what does he say? He gave thanks, verse 14 says. He gave thanks. So he's thanking God for what God will do before the miracle happens. Did you notice that? The bread hasn't been miraculously multiplied yet. It's still 5 loaves and 2 fish that he's bringing up to heaven. And he's thanking God, you're going to provide. You're going to do what is necessary. I'm trusting you. I'm thanking you in advance. Here we go. Say it with me. Turn to God. Trust God. Thank God. Say it with me. Turn to God. That's how you model for your kids how to trust God. You turn to him first, not as a last resort. You immediately address him. You immediately say, Lord, I bring this to you. Like Hezekiah in the Old Testament, bringing the threat from the king of Assyria next to him. Hey, Lord, I bring to you the threat. I bring to you my bills. I bring to you my problems. I bring to you my resources. I bring it all to you. I'm turning to you. I'm trusting you. And I'm thanking you that you're going to sovereignly do the right thing because you're perfect in all of your ways. You're perfect in all your ways. I'm trusting you, Father. Let's go back to the beginning. Today, Jesus is ministering to us on two levels. He's feeding us. He's challenging us. He's helping us. But he's also training. Are you hearing the training words of Jesus today? Are you feeling the challenge to trust God? Are you hearing the challenge as a dad to train your kids to trust God? What levels is he speaking to you right now on? Open your ears. Open your eyes. Don't miss either lesson. The healing, the feeding, the miracle he wants to do in your life, and the training. And then pass it on to your kids. Teach them to trust God. Teach them to care for people. You say, Jim, I know that's the way preachers are supposed to talk. Love people, love God, blah, 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 blah. But you don't know my circumstances. God doesn't come through for me like he comes through for you and like he comes through in the Bible. It's not working for me. Let me say to you, the same God of the Bible is the same God who's at work today in your life and my life. The same things that you see him doing in my life and in other people's lives, he's doing them in your life. You just don't see them yet. This is what trust is. Trust is not seeing what God's doing. It's trusting when you don't see. Trust is not, I know how he's going to do it. Trust is, I have no idea how he's going to do this, but I'm going to trust him in the storm. I'm going to trust him in impossible circumstances. I'm going to trust God even though I have no idea how he's going to make this happen. That's what trusting God looks like. You just haven't seen how he's going to part the sea. You just haven't seen how he's going to multiply the loaves. You just haven't seen how he's going to work things out. But he is working them out in his perfect timing as you trust him, as you follow him. And you're like, I know that's good preaching, but I'm not sure I can trust him. Okay, let me go here then. What God the Father did for you when he sent his son to die for you on the cross is more than you ever need to believe he is trustworthy. You're in a situation where on this earth you cannot save yourself. Your sin has separated you from God, and there's nothing you can do to get right with God, to earn right with God. So God takes the first move. He has already proven his love and his trustworthiness. Every time you doubt it, just look at the cross. The Father has proven his love. Have you all seen this picture of the baseball game a couple months ago where this bat was swung by a Major League Baseball player and lost it? So big muscular guy swings his bat, loses. The bat is a missile right for this kid's face. Can you all see this? Let me blow it up. Right for his face. And look at Dad, big old strong arm. Ha! I got this. Back here's all the people freaking out. Whoa! Look at them all. Ah! Here's the dad. I got this. Look at the son. He's stinking texting at a baseball game. He's so clueless. I'm here to tell you, God has rescued you from the death missiles of Satan over and over and over again. You don't even realize how many times he's put out his arm, how Jesus took the bullet for you. He has proven again and again and again. And we doubt him. We doubt him. Let me call you, trust your heavenly Father. He's a good, good Father. He's so trustworthy, Surrender all to him. Give your life to him. Go all in. Because this God that you turn to, that you trust, will never, ever let you down. Amen? Come on, those of you who know this, amen? This is our God. And so, Lord, we address you as a sovereign one. Good, good Father. Forgive us for our sin of doubting you when you've been so faithful. Forgive us for our self-sufficiency, as if we're sticking our nose up at your faithfulness and saying, oh, we've got it from here. Lord, forgive us for our sin. Teach us to trust you. And those of us who are fathers and mothers, oh God, help us to train our kids to care about people and to train our kids to trust you. Because you are the only fully trustworthy one. And so to you we give our worship, our praise. To you we surrender. You are good, good Father. And in Jesus, his Son's name, we all say amen.